We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. And today we have Eric on the show. Eric is from Iowa, and he's also the Analytical Iowan on TikTok at Analytical Iowan. If you haven't checked it out, by all means, do it. Welcome back, Eric. I wanted to get you back here. It's been a little while since we've talked, and we've had a lot of shit happen, and I knew you'd have an opinion based on watching your TikToks.
Oh yeah, well, glad to be back. I love being on the podcast. It's always a good time, and I like sharing my opinion with anybody who will listen.
That's pretty much how it started with me too. Anybody who will listen. And if it's somebody in my family, they go, "Oh shit, I don't need to hear that again." So I welcome the fact that there are people out there that want to listen. Um, we've had an interesting week with the way things have been going for Harris and Walls. We had Biden and Harris do their little presentation, their little campaign rally, and then Donald Trump has his press conference. That's quite a contrast, isn't it? It's pretty
Oh yeah,
amazing what's going
oh
on
yeah.
there. Donald Trump, I don't understand why the Republicans aren't freaking out because this guy seems completely off the hinge.
They're not freaking out because all the ones that would, they've kicked out of the party or have pushed and backed into a corner so far that their opinion doesn't matter anymore.
And they don't have a plan B.
Yeah, there is no plan B. We've talked about it before. There's no depth in the Republican ticket.
Right, right. What, he just recently, Donald Trump, one of the things they're going off on now, every day there's some crazy shit that he says. And the one thing they're really hopping on, and the military's hopping on, uh, how he was talking about the uh, Congressional Medal of Freedom and the Congressional Medal of Honor. He'd given the Medal of Freedom to this donor, a friend of his, um, and he said, listen, the Congressional Medal of Honor, Congressional Medal of Freedom, they're pretty much the same thing. One is for civilians, one is for military, but the civilian one is the better one to get because the ones getting the military one are all shot up or dead.
Jesus Christ.
How,
He,
how do you not know that's a bad idea?
And this is the same guy who said our dead servicemen were losers and suckers.
Exactly.
But yet the pro military crowd is all behind him. I don't get it.
Yeah, I think less and less military people. I mean, what I've always said, and you've said this too, just let Donnie talk. He's going to destroy himself in the long run. I think we're in a different time with Donald Trump. Donald Trump had his rise and everybody just laughed at everything he said. But people love to tear somebody down too. And I think he's in his descent. And in this descent, people aren't quite as tolerant of the crazy shit he's saying. People are recognizing it and then kind of stepping away from this fuck.
Well, I think that's part of it. And part of it too is with Joe Biden not being in the race, the comparison is to a young, energetic Kamala Harris,
Right.
who definitely is with it, who isn't suffering the effects of age like Donald Trump, and to some extent, Joe Biden. You can
Right.
tell there's a big difference there. So when he says something stupid, there isn't the offsetting stupid comment or gaffe made by Joe Biden to go, oh, well, it's just one of the two old guys who said something dumb. It's like, oh, this is a presidential candidate. He said that. Like people are noticing it because there's such that of a difference there.
Right. Well, on Thursday, Donald Trump announced that he was going to have an economic speech. Not quite a rally because he couldn't draw a crowd big enough to call it a rally. But the intention was he was going to come out and talk about economics. And he comes out at Bedminster in New Jersey, a table set up with all kinds of groceries to illustrate the fact that everything's so high cost and how that's Biden's fault. So he comes out there and he kind of starts reading, and it's very low key, low energy. He doesn't seem to be liking it. And then he says, he starts throwing some numbers around, but there's no context to the numbers. So you really don't know what he's saying. And eventually you can see he's getting bored. And then he starts going off. When I was watching him, I'm going, how long can he keep this up? And clearly, it wasn't very long before he started to go off and start hammering Kamala and the Democrats and all this stuff. And this is all working against him. And by contrast, on Friday, Kamala Harris comes out and gives an economic speech and gives a very cogent, intelligent strategy to do what she wants to do, which is something the people of this country are really accepting of, because finally it's something that's going to be helping the middle class. How do people not see that contrast? This guy's got fucking nothing, and this woman's got it figured out.
Well, the people in the middle, I think, are seeing that contrast because that's why you're seeing the groups pop up, and not just the groups of the people that are already supporting her. That's where you're seeing the groups like Red States for Harris, Republicans for Harris. They're seeing the contrast, and he doesn't have a plan. His whole thing was, I saw some clips on that. Well, 100% of the jobs created, over 100% of the jobs created were all given to illegal migrants crossing the border.
Yeah, my God.
And people are just dragging him on that. It's like he just says whatever he's going to say because he knows it fires up his base, and all he cares about is getting cheers from the stupid people who will cheer for him.
Right. Well, when you get a narcissist, he can't help but he very extreme. It's either the absolute best or the absolute worst. And what was funny about him saying 100% of the jobs um, were taken by illegal immigrants, that wasn't enough for him. He had to say, actually, I think it's more than that, more than 100%. And he literally said that as if he was saying something valuable. How is that even possible? Didn't the Wharton School of Business teach him fucking basic math, for Christ's sake? You can't have more than 100%.
He probably slept through math, like he slept through his court cases.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Um, so I think you're right. People always tell me you'll never convince the people that are the Trumplefucks, the base. And I know that's true, and I don't really care. The real important part of it is like you say, the people in the middle, the independents, the Republicans of a reasonable mindset. And I think they are finally seeing it for what it is. It's not the media just hyping up Donald Trump and it's the fun train to get on. It's now becoming very clear. You got one person that doesn't know anything and somebody else that has actually an idea or two that might be a good strategy for this country.
Oh yeah, with some of what she was talking about with her economic plan, I thought a lot of that was good. She wants to increase the child tax credit again up to $3,600, even though Republicans went against it.
Right.
She wants to give new parents on their first tax return after their child is born. I think that she wants to increase that up to 6,000 for the first year. And then she was talking about a $25,000 first time homebuyer tax credit. Those things are great, along with tax incentives for making it better for contractors and people to invest to build homes that would be sold to families instead of investment properties and landlords. Um, it all sounds good. I mean, she wants to do what Joe Biden wanted to do, which is build our economy from the bottom up and the middle out. She's just
Right.
saying it slightly better. Her
Right.
messages are landing.
Yeah, that's true. Now, excuse me, as a retired guy, that stuff all sounds good. Most of it won't really affect me directly. It might affect my kids, my grandkids, and that stuff. But as a younger guy living in a red state in Iowa, do you think what she said Friday resonates with people of your age group or younger? Do you think they grasp that, or are they just not paying attention?
If they hear it and it comes to be if it comes to be a thing, that'll definitely resonate with them. If they're hearing about it and there's some excitement behind it, if they get it messaged the right way, yeah, I think it would resonate with a lot of people in my age group. I know a lot of people in my age range that have struggled to own a house,
Right.
to even find one that's affordable or to find a rent that's affordable. Um, and it's ridiculous. So if with the idea of more money going toward families, that's going to be a good thing. Now you're going to get the pushback from people on the right. And one of the things they're going to say is like with the expanded child tax credit or the first time credit for new parents right after the birth of a child, they're going to say, "Well, I had my children and I didn't get that." And
Yeah.
it's never about like to them, it's never about helping everybody.
Yeah.
To
What
them,
do
it's
I get?
what did I get out of it? I don't get anything. I should get an equal share, and that's not how that works.
Well, what they have
They
to
don't.
understand, what they have to understand is what they get is a better fucking economy that doesn't
Right.
go off the fucking cliff. It's not all about you. It's all about the country. And if the country's doing fine, then you'll do fine. Um, in you're a working man down in Iowa. You're doing fine, but you probably work with some folks. This whole struggle that we hear about with younger folks. Uh, are you seeing that firsthand? People just going paycheck to paycheck, hand to
Oh
mouth,
yeah.
just trying to survive?
Oh yeah. I know a lot of people that are that way. One of the things my job does, luckily, I don't need to dip into it, but they do offer a service called daily pay, where the day after you work a shift, you can have access to a portion of your paycheck in
Wow.
advance. And I know people who, instead of waiting 2 weeks for their paycheck, every few days are dipping into the hours they've already worked just to pay their bills, just to get caught up. The problem is, then your paycheck comes around and now you're missing $200, $300,
Right, right,
whatever that amount is that you bought that you took in early. It's kind of like a payday loan, but it's just from the hours you've already put in. And like I said, a lot of people are doing it because they need it. Oh, it's convenient. I need $20 for gas today, or I need to go get, $50 worth of groceries or whatever. But then they turn around and when their paycheck comes and they got their bills, they're going, oh, I got to make this stretch even farther.
right.
Then they got to borrow against the next paycheck already. You take it out early, and it's a never ending cycle.
Yeah. Well, I'm fortunate now that at my advanced age, we pared everything down where we downsized a lot of stuff. We have some income that we created over the years. So I don't have the financial struggle, but I did when I was younger. And it wasn't always about not making enough money. It's having too many things to pay for. I remember being young and not having a lot of money and how stressful it is and how it freaks people out. And it troubles me when I see young people in that situation because I know what it was like. And at the very least, if somebody's going to make the effort to go out and work, they should be able to make enough to survive. That's not too much to ask. And I think that's what Kamala Harris is saying. It's not all about $7 an hour minimum wage. Nobody can live off $7 an hour. A fucking kid living with his family, just trying to buy beer and go to movies, that's barely enough. That whole culture has to change in this country, and I'm hoping that with somebody like Harrison Walls coming in, that we can at least start in that direction.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, I know from what listening to people, it's bad. Like my one of my best friends there for a while, prior to them extending that tax credit, he was really hurting. But then when they gave him the tax credit and let him take it early month to month, that helped him afford the health or the child care that let him go to work to be able to finish paying the rest of his bills. Without it, he
Right,
couldn't pay for his daycare.
right,
But then he runs into the thing. If he can't afford the daycare, he can't go to work. And then if he doesn't go to work, he can't afford to pay his bills, including the daycare. And
right.
it becomes a never ending cycle.
And then God forbid your car breaks down or you get sick. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been in that situation before where you only have so much money, and it always seemed like when you did get a slight windfall, something happened where you had to spend it all on something. And it's stressful enough to live your life. That's why, when people say to me, "Don't you wish you could go back to your younger days and just relive that?" Fuck no, it's hard. And it's a lot harder now than it was for me.
Oh, yeah. It is hard. I mean, I know a lot of people who are struggling. Um, and I know it's not the same, but One of my coworkers just recently bought a car. It's either a 2023 or 2024.
Yeah.
His car payment is almost $900 a month.
That's
That's my
absolutely.
mortgage.
Yeah. When my son was buying a car, uh, he was leasing a car and he says, it's about 550 a month. What do you think? That's fucking crazy. I don't think I've ever paid more than $300 a month for a car payment. And I am now because my wife bought another car. Um, but yeah, I mean, the problem is, when I was younger and I bought a new car for $300 a month, and now it's $900 a month. The big problem is the income hasn't increased commensurately to that. So how do you do it? I mean, it was tough back then. Now you have less money, more expenses, and then this is something that's got to shift. I mean, um, then this is what people have to understand about like forgiving loans and such. The old people like me, well, I didn't have to do that. I pulled myself up by the bootstraps. Well, that's fine, but it was different then. College wasn't as expensive as it is now. Everything wasn't as expensive then as it is now, and you're not making any more money. It's got to change, and there's got to be some equality here a little bit. You know, the wealthy people want all the money. They don't want a lot of it. They want all of it, and eventually it becomes not viable. If you've got people that can't survive and can't even pay their bills, how do you expect old people like us to sell our homes, which is our retirement, and sell them at a good profit when nobody can afford it or qualify for it? That's the problem, and that's the dangerous thing we're looking at in the future as far as the economy. Everything
Oh yeah, very
stops.
much. Oh yeah, very much so. And the only people who could afford to buy the houses from the older people would be the landlords and the investments who are buying it to rent to somebody for three times the mortgage payment.
Yeah,
And then rent goes up again and nobody gains.
right,
That's why Kamala Harris and her plan of putting more money in with the tax incentives and stuff to building more housing for first time home buyers, smaller homes that would be starter homes for families, is a good idea. Giving tax incentives so those people can get, a house is a good idea. Let them have the $25,000. Now, I hope this is a selfish hope, but I hope she does what Joe Biden said, and because he wanted to do something similar when he ran,
right,
and he wanted to go all the way back to March of 2020 to the beginning of the pandemic.
right.
I would love it if they went back that far because then I'd qualify. But
Absolutely.
that's a selfish hope. But if I don't, I don't. I'm not going to be upset that somebody else got it because I didn't qualify. It wasn't there at the time I bought my house.
Well,
So I shouldn't qualify.
and the thing about it is that we want to be selling houses. That's good for the economy. And like I say, if kids can't afford it because of their student loans or just by virtue of not making enough money, I mean, think of it this way. I've looked around for apartments because my son was looking for an apartment, and an inexpensive one bedroom apartment right now in this town, minimum $1,600. Let's say you're a kid making $10 an hour. That's 1,600 bucks a month gross that you make. It's not possible.
Yeah.
You can't make that kind of money and live on your own. It just doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous.
No, no, you can't. To make and then a lot of them have double and triple rent as what your income requirement is, or you don't qualify to live there.
Yeah.
They've priced them. The thing is, they've priced themselves to the point where no one's going to be able to afford to live there, and then they're going to have to come back down. Or we're going to have to do something to raise the standard of living for everybody to get us there. That's another thing Kamala Harris was talking about is she wants to go after price gouging and like the supermarkets and stuff that are price gouging. I hope that also includes going after landlords and finding a way to lower rent back to a reasonable level.
We got to look at um, breaking up some monopolies too. I mean, we've got, three and four people creating groceries, and they're colluding, and they're raising the prices artificially, and so that's why they have the record profits, and we're paying more money. It's about greed, and people have to understand. You might want to blame Joe Biden because he's the president and the prices are high. Well, they're coming down now. Whatever he's doing in his administration is working. It went from 7% when he took over to about under 3% now. So that's going the right direction. Um, but the reason we have these problems isn't because of Joe Biden or the Democrats. It's about the Republicans constantly putting their thumb on the scale for the wealthy people, taking away regulations and requirements and rules and laws and stuff so they can just run roughshod. They've proven that you let the free market go and let them do what they want, it doesn't work. I don't, maybe it should, but it does not work. So that's why there's needs to be some regulations and some control out there.
Oh, I agree. And that's something another TikTok creator, Tom Powell Jr., talks about. He says you should be able to make, he's for regulated capitalism, where I hope I'm getting his message right, but where you have like these companies can make as much money as they want, but they should be required to do certain things, like make sure their employees are being paid a livable wage.
Right.
Like you can't have a company like Walmart that is one of the biggest companies in the world making billions and billions of dollars of profit a month and having over it's like 70%, I think, I could have the number wrong, of their employees qualifying for government assistance of some
Right.
kind.
Right. The thing about it is they get away with paying people little or nothing and treating people poorly because they can get away with it. No one's stopping them from doing that. I like the idea that Kamala and Tim Walz is pushing hard on these unions. I've not always been a fan of unions, but unions have their place when there's some um, um, discrepancies going on and people aren't getting paid. And we may have gotten out of it. We had the 30s, 40s, 50s, there were unions, 60s, there was unions. And then we kind of got away from unions, but it's gone awry here. So we need the unions back to straighten some shit out. So I'm all for anybody who wants to back a union, and anybody should have the opportunity to organize so they can just, they're not asking for a lot, just making a living wage.
Oh yeah, but I've worked for a couple different companies over the years that have said unofficially, and I've heard it through different things, and I take it with a grain of salt. But the rumor, at least running through the management chain, was that if you overhear people talking about unionizing,
Yeah.
if corporate were to hear about it, they would find an excuse to shut the location, no matter how profitable it was, rather than deal with letting a union in the door.
Yeah. And the funny thing is I've run a business or two, not a big business where I had a lot of employees, but a business. And here's the bottom line. If you can't run a business, pay your bills, and pay people decently, you've done a bad job in building this business. The paying of your employees should be just a given, and paying them in such a way that they're happy and they like coming to work and they're productive. That's the thing, is it's just about taking advantage of people, and that's the wrong way to manage people. It's much better if people are happy and healthy and doing what they need to do. Everything works better, but they're trying to pinch these pennies and try to scrape every extra dime off of anything they can do. And unfortunately, it's the workers that take the beating.
Oh, definitely. And you were talking about unions. Couple, why we don't or why we have a modern 40-hour work week is considered the standard? Unions.
Unions, yeah.
We have, why we don't have the company store? Unions. There's a lot of things that were pushed and fought for by the union. And they have, ever since Reagan, they've been made out to be the boogeyman.
Right.
They've been made out to be the bad guy in the cost of everything. Now, can unions be bad? Are there some things about it that you hear maybe are bad? Sure.
Hmm.
Like I had heard, and I don't know if this is true, but there was one rumor going around at one point with the auto workers that if your job got replaced, the union had fought that they had to still pay you if your job got automated, that they had to find another job for you. And if they
Right.
couldn't, you just had to show up every day and they'd pay you to sit there. Now, if that's true, it's great for the union for working out that kind of a deal to protect their employees. It just shows that unions work to protect the worker. But then you hear, well, that's why everything's so expensive. Like that's how they become the boogeyman.
Yeah. And it's hard to feel sorry for people selling products and making them expensive when your profits are at record levels. I mean, how much is
Yes.
enough? There's never enough for these people. I mean, you've got to consider all aspects of your business. And, if you're making hamburgers, it would be better, more profitable to buy cheap hamburger and sell that, but then nobody's going to buy it because it's shit. It also makes sense to pay good workers a good wage so the service is good. I mean, that's one of the things you see when you go out to restaurants and such. We know the ones to go to, so we find people with good service and we tip them appropriately. But it's much harder to get people to work, and they want to say it's because young people are lazy. I don't think that's the issue. Maybe sometimes, but I think it's why would a kid want to come to work for a pittance and pay and still have to struggle every day? You got to go to work every day, kick your ass, make a little bit of money, and then you got to find another second or third job just to survive. You wonder why they have a fucking bad attitude. Well, of course they're going to have a bad attitude.
Yeah, exactly. Um, you know, you were talking about like going places where you get tipped. Well, Kamala Harris has taken a part of Donald Trump's plan and says she doesn't want to tax tips for hospitality and food service workers. Now, if she keeps it that way and limits how it's phrased, that could be a good thing. But as some creators I've noticed that are in that field are saying, that's not the entirety of the problem.
Right,
Taxes aren't the whole problem. Part of it is the employer's only required to pay out $2 and whatever an hour base if
right,
they get tips.
right.
And by making it some sort of a tip out program where you got to pay a percentage of your sales to the bartender and to the cook staff and everything, they can pay those people less too. And your server doesn't even get to keep all of the tips that you may give because they have to chip into a pool to
Right.
cover everybody else in the restaurant because the restaurant owner doesn't want to pay them even more money, pay them any more than they have to.
Well, and that's the ridiculous thing. When I tip somebody, to me, that's extra over and above for doing a job over and above what they'd expect. But that's not how it's played out. I'm going to pay you less every hour because you're going to get tips. I'm going to pay you less because you're good at your job. That makes no fucking sense. And the reason we have that again has to do with wealthy people trying to get away with something. Now they're going to say, well, meals are going to get more expensive in restaurants if we have to pay them a reasonable wage. Um, it's already fucking expensive. I mean, if my wife and I go out to dinner, it used to be $30, we could get something to eat. Now it's like $50. It's expensive. But I don't understand the whole concept of paying people nothing because those people you're paying nothing are your customers. That's what this country has to understand. If these people working made more money, that means they buy more shit. And if they buy more shit, companies and businesses and the economy does better. It's just a matter of uh, feeding back into the system. It's like lumber yards. It took them a while, but lumber yards would be cutting down trees, and then finally they figured we got to plant some more fucking trees. Otherwise, we're going to run out of trees. And business should look at it that way. You've got to cultivate uh, your workforce and make sure that they're healthy so that they can also be consumers.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, it's bad enough that these places, they want to pay you so little and then you can't even afford to buy stuff where you're shopping from.
Right.
You got to go to the next spot down the list on cheaper product to get what you want or whatever. And everyone says, well, it's only an entry level job. It shouldn't be a career or whatever. No, minimum wage was designed to be the bare minimum wage a person could earn and support a family of four with your basic necessities. Now, have those necessities changed a little bit since minimum wage became a thing? Sure. Because I would argue now an internet connection is almost required. A
Right.
cell phone is almost required. Because how many times have you gone looking? Well, maybe not you, but has someone gone looking for a job and said, I need a paper application? They look at you like you're crazy.
Right.
Paper
Right.
application. Go onto the website. Go file through our app or whatever. You need those things now.
Well, the minimum wage hasn't changed in 22 years, and I can guarantee you prices have gone up in those 22 years, and that's the inequality of this whole thing. It's just common sense. You've got to look at it. Now, the one thing I will say, Kamala gave a very specific, well, relatively specific plan of what she wants to do. Donald Trump was supposed to talk about the economy. He didn't really talk about the economy. The only thing he said regarding the economy was drill, baby, drill. The fuck is that? We got to get energy down and that'll fix everything. Bullshit. We're already producing more oil than we ever have in history, more oil than anybody in the world. How is that going to fix anything? But that's just the buzzwords that Donald Trump knows. He doesn't know anything about fixing the economy. He doesn't care about the economy. All he cares about is getting the power. And that's what people have to recognize when they hear these two people talking.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you slightly.
Okay.
And that's he doesn't care about having the power of the presidency. The only thing he cares at this point is keeping his butt out of a jail cell.
Yeah, yeah, I think
He
that's
doesn't
probably
want the job of presidency. That's work. He doesn't want to work. He just doesn't want to go to jail.
he is a narcissist though, and power is sexy to him. But you're right. The first and foremost, he's trying to stay out of the jail cell, and I think he's going to end up there ultimately. I mean, he's not going to win the election. He's not going to be a candidate for president after November 5th. He's going to be very vulnerable, and he's got a lot of shit hanging over his head.
Oh, he does. But on what you were saying with the energy, I was watching Mr. Global and he was talking. Mr. Global knows the oil and gas markets, he knows
Yeah,
energy.
yeah, he
And
does.
one of the things Donald Trump said there is he wants to cut energy costs by 50%. And Mr. Global goes, and he thinks that's going to lower it. If anything, that's going to cause everything to skyrocket
Right.
because these companies are going to go, oh, my electric bill's 50% cheaper. Well, I can make that much more money, and they're just going to pocket it. They're not going to pass that savings on to
No.
consumers. That's not how that's going to work. And he went on a whole breakdown of how what they would have to do and what they would have to cut to get to those kind of numbers. And he goes, and it would crater our energy markets here in the United States, our oil and gas markets and everything, where it would take us decades to recover from how bad that would screw us.
Right. Well, and the thing about it is Donald Trump is just spewing words. One of his big tax plans is tariffs. And tariffs are absolutely ridiculous. I've talked to Trump fucks who said, yeah, we'll just put tariffs on everything, 10% here, 10% there, and then China will pay for it. You always talk about the free market. So if you want to talk about the free market, you put a 10% tariff on China. What happens? The price of the product goes up by 10% and we pay the tariff. I don't care what anybody says. That's how it works out. That's all it always worked out. And that will just kill the economy and increase inflation. And how anybody with half a brain can't see that, I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, what Donald Trump would want to do is, if he was going to really try to get China to pay for it, would be to put it as an export tax on things China is buying from us,
Right,
and that would do it. But this tariff idea, no, all it does is we pay it. And I would even venture to say that he puts a 10% price tariff on everything. We wouldn't pay 10% more for everything. I think we'd pay 15 or 20 because they go,
Yeah.
well, our costs went up, so we're going to up it even more because we can make a little more money by claiming this big hardship because you guys really don't know how much our costs actually went up by. So
Right.
we can fudge our numbers.
Well, and then you're in a trade war. So now China and all these other places put tariffs on our products, and he forgets that we export a lot of stuff, wheat and all kinds of things. And now this is going to hit the pocketbooks of farmers and producers in this country. I mean, it's just a pissing contest, and we all get to pay the price. And he doesn't even understand that. And apparently a lot of people who support him don't fucking get it either.
Well, the last go round when he put the tariffs on China and he got into that trade war, they had to pass a big farmer bailout plan
Right.
for billions and billions of dollars because no one was buying our products and because we export a lot of our grain and a lot of the stuff out of the heartland
And oil.
that
We
no one
export
that
we're for the first time we're exporting oil out of this country.
right. And as we're exporting the stuff and no one's buying it, well then they're making contracts to buy from, South America, or they were buying from Ukraine or wherever they could get it grown for a better price than what we had because we had the extra uh, tariff on stuff. Or they were in this trade war. It was ridiculous. So they said, okay, we'll go around you guys. And you don't just recover from that the minute you drop the trade war. It
No.
takes years sometimes to bounce that back.
Well, it's like the supply chain. Once everything we got out of COVID, that didn't mean the supply chain was fixed. It took months and months and months for it to get back to normal. And that's the thing is you've got all these things going on, and all he's doing is what he does best is create more chaos in the economy and in the market. And that's his answer. His answer to inflation is tariffs, which would have the opposite effect on inflation, and drill, baby, drill, and get more oil when we're already producing more oil than we ever have in the history of the world, this country anyway. Um, he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. And it just strikes me as strange that there are some people, some Republicans, that say, yeah, he's got it. I love his policies. Well, if you love his policies, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Oh yeah. Another one is he likes to rag on Biden. Well, he does, and so do his supporters, for selling off the one strategic oil reserve, the one location. Biden sold all of it. Biden closed it down. Well, Donald Trump actually signed it into law that that one got closed down, and he had to sell it by a certain date.
Yeah,
So all Joe Biden was doing was following the law that Trump put in place. But
right.
you want to give Joe Biden the hard time for it and say it's his fault. They just don't understand how anything works, and they're just loud. That's all they are.
You know what I like about this is that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have come out, and everything they're doing is pretty positive and fun. You know, when you go to the rallies, you see the rallies. Old Soul was at one. It was kind of like a concert or a rock show of some sort. It's very jubilant and a lot of joy and excitement. And Donald Trump on the other side of the coin is very dark and draconian, and this country's shit. It won't be good until I'm president. Right now, it's shit. We're dying on the vine. If I don't get elected, there's no coming back from it. And I think people are really tired of the darkness and the chaos and the negativity that we've dealt with for 8 years. They are just starving for some positivity. And what Donald Trump is doing is killing him and his campaign. And Harris and Walz are just drawing people in, even Republicans, because we're ready to fucking be happy again.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I love Joe Biden.
I do too.
Joe Biden was a great president. I think he's going to go down. I think he's right now 14th best all time. I think he's going to stay in that range somewhere. But when Joe Biden was campaigning, his message wasn't, even though he would come out with stats and figures, and yes, he's got a plan, it still came off more of a, if you don't elect me, all this negative shit's going to happen from the other guy. And it
Right.
was still more of that doom and gloom,
Yeah, it was still doom and gloom.
vibe. Whereas like you said, the Harris Walls ticket has a positive, upbeat feel. It feels vibrant
Yeah.
and hopeful, and that has been, I think, the biggest contrast between the two of them.
Yeah, Joe's excuse me. Joe has always been kind of a low key guy. He's always about the facts. Donald Trump wants to do this, but we're going to do this because this is better. And it was kind of boring to a lot of people. And we live in a different age than we did in the 60s and 70s. People need to be fucking entertained. And that's why Donald Trump did well in 2016. He was a dipshit. He was dangerous, but he was entertaining. Now people are getting bored with his little game because it's the same shit over and over again. Now they've seen the other shiny object, that being Harrison Walls, and they're excited by that. So the pendulum has gone the other way. Donald Trump's
Oh,
losing attention, and now all the tension is on Kamala Harris and Tim Walls, and they need to ride that for the next 78 days or whatever it is until they get elected. And I think they will.
oh, definitely. And the media is captured on that. I mean, you're seeing more and more the media is now focusing on the negative with Donald Trump,
Right,
where they were focusing all that negative on Joe Biden.
right.
They spent 3 or 4 weeks, saying, "Oh my God, is Joe Biden going to drop out? Is he going to drop out? He says he's staying in, but oh my God, is he going to drop out? It's his decision." And now with every gaffe, Donald Trump is getting that attention. Maybe not the is he going to drop out, but it's the negative headline. It's Donald Trump said something stupid. Oh, disastrous rally in Montana. He had his press conference with Elon Musk, or his interview with Elon Musk, where it sounded like he was missing his dentures. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, it
the
was
whole
horrible.
thing was the media is now covering him in that this is ridiculous negative light. And people, I think, are finally realizing how bad Donald Trump is, in part because of that.
Well, the media just wants the big story. And Joe
Oh, yeah.
Biden, whether they cared or not, if he stepped aside, they knew it was going to be a huge story. It was going to be historic. So they wanted that to happen. So they pushed that to happen. And now Kamala comes in. And I don't think a lot of people expected to see what happened actually happen. We thought Kamala would come in and would just kind of, you know, she might get a little bump. No one expected all this excitement behind her. And as soon as the media saw that excitement, they go, oh, that's where we got to go now. That's where the views are. That's where the attention is. So it's just a matter of where they can get attention. And thankfully, Kamala and Tim Walls is where it is. And I think it'll stick like that, certainly up through the election. Everybody says, well, it's a honeymoon period. Nah, there's too many other things happening. The debate is going to be hilarious when that happens. When Tim Walls debates um, JD Vance, that's going to be a disaster for JD Vance. So there's all these things, and we're going to talk about it when we come back from the break. The convention coming up because that's going to be interesting. But everything is going the way of Walls and Harris, and there's always something every week that's going to hype it up even more to maintain this momentum that they have going toward the election.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I agree with you. And I think this kind of ties into something we were talking about before we got on. I was talking about Hawk
Yeah,
and Hawk coming out. He had a video a day or two ago, depending on when this airs. And he was talking about how, well, that's the ball game. If we don't get the Senate, it's the ball game. It's over. We already lost Manchin. John Tester's probably gonna he's down in the polls. He's gonna get beaten Montana. We can't win. Oh, well, we might get Rick Scott in Florida might get beat. Um, so maybe we can keep a 50-50 split, but oh, it's the ball game. And I'm maybe exaggerating a little bit, but that was his message. And it was bringing it back down. I think with the positivity that the Harris Walls ticket brings, there's plenty of spots where we could pick up a seat. I know the Republicans are only defending 9, but uh, what's her name? Is it Blackburn in Tennessee?
yeah, I think so.
She might be in the hot seat because I can't think of her opponent. It's the gal that was one of the Tennessee Three.
Right, right. Okay, yeah,
She's up for reelection, or Marsha Blackburn's up for reelection with against a popular opponent. You have Josh Hawley in Missouri.
Yeah.
He's very unliked in Missouri.
Ted
In
Cruz.
Missouri has a abortion on the ballot. You have Ted Cruz in Texas. Ted Cruz is unliked. He's unliked everywhere he goes.
Right.
I mean, and then you add Rick Scott in Florida. That's four potential seats that could flip. The Democrats could come out of this not only still with the Senate, but they could come out gaining a seat or two.
Yeah, I think so too. And actually, let's continue with that conversation after we come back with a break because, when I hear people with these negative attitudes about what's going to happen in the Senate, I've disagreed with them all along, and we can talk about why I disagree with them and you disagree with them. But let's take a quick break, and we will be right back. We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. We're talking to Eric from Iowa, and we're talking a little bit about some of the things that are going on. And when we took a break, we were talking about some other creators on TikTok. And I'll just say this, you mentioned Hawk, and I like Hawk. I think he's a smart guy. He's a lawyer. Um, and I try to decide what some of these creators are doing. It's one of two things they're doing when they go from really high to really low to upset and scared. They're either terrified about the prospect of Donald Trump becoming president or us not getting power in the Senate, that they get down on themselves, they get in their own heads, and then they have to go negative on it. Or they're all about the drama. They're doing the same thing the media does. It's like they enjoy the drama. Now, Hawk is an interesting character. Like I say, I do like him. I think he's very smart. I don't know him at all, but I've watched him from the beginning, the time I got on TikTok. He was of a like mind with all of us, and he wasn't too discerning about who could watch his stuff. He didn't block Trump-la-fucks like you and I do. So he got just pounded by Trump-la-fucks, taking him down, getting banned, getting another account, getting another account. Okay. You can do it any way you want. And I'm not going to fault him for doing that. It's just not the way I would do it. But then when it came down to Joe stepping aside, a lot of people felt a lot of loyalty to Joe because Joe hasn't done anything wrong. And he basically said, well, Joe's going to step aside. Joe's going to step aside. He needs to step aside. And he started talking shit about Joe. This pissed off the Democrats. Now, the Democrats went after his ass and tried to take him down too. And I'm thinking, maybe learn a lesson there. Maybe instead of going from one end to the other end and causing all this drama, just try not to get into your head and just try to look at the logic of all these things. And I've always been one who said, I don't need somebody with a negative attitude. If you're going into a football game or a war, if anybody on your team says, I know we're going to lose, you should shoot them yourself because they're of no fucking value to you. Really, they're of no value to you. So this whole idea that well, we could win the House and we could get Kamala in, but we're still fucked because the Senate won't flip to maintain the margins for the Democrats. Here's the thing: everything they say about the Senate or about this election is based on history. And I've said this a million times. It's based on history. But we are living at a point in history that we've never seen before. Sure, it might be harder to win the Senate based on history, but there's a couple of things that come into play here that change everything. Little thing like Roe v. Wade and states that have the abortion question on the ballot. That's going to bring out more people that support abortion, more Democrats, and that changes the whole perspective on who's going to win a Senate race. It could have an effect in Texas on Ted Cruz. It could have an effect on Rick Scott in Florida. It could have an effect on Josh Hawley. And they're not taking that into consideration. They're already assuming, oh, we fucking lost. look at the reasons why we can win and understand that this isn't like any other time we've ever experienced.
Oh, you're right. I kind of went down a rabbit hole here in Iowa, a small one, but I was doing a video talking about blue cities and how you always hear every time, well, look at all this red when they color in all the spot where there are
Yeah,
no people. And it's clear, oh, it's just a few cities that run everything. Well, that's where the people are. Well, I
right,
looked here in Iowa. The Des Moines Metro has got about 750,000 people in it. Once you get out of the top 10 for top 10 most populous counties, number 11 is at like 55,000 people in the entire damn county out of,
right, right,
we've got 99 counties. So there's not very many people in these counties. So you can, if we drive people out to vote, especially in statewide races like a Senate race, there's people there that could vote and vote blue. They've just been conditioned to believe their vote's not gonna matter. They're not gonna flip their state.
right,
I mean, we had Joe Manchin in West Virginia for how long?
right.
12, 18 years, maybe longer.
Yeah.
We could maybe there's a chance we could keep the West Virginia seat. It's unlikely. West Virginia is pretty red, but still, if Democrats show up and vote, and I'm not even sure who's running in that race, but whoever's running as the Democrat, if they can appeal to moderate Republicans, there's a chance we could keep that seat.
Well, you mentioned, and I know Jace has mentioned about Texas because they're so red, Iowa and Texas. There are Democrats out there, like you say, will just stay on the couch and won't get out and vote. But if they are motivated and excited about the prospects and motivated by Roe v. Wade or whatever else is going on in those red states, those people that never got off the couch before, if they get off now, some of these races have been pretty close. It wouldn't have taken as much to flip the state.
Well, speaking of a close race, now I live in Iowa, as we've established. I didn't know this because it wasn't my district. In 2020, Iowa House District 2 was decided by 6 votes.
Yeah,
Six, not 60, not 600, six. I
exactly.
mean, that's if 7 people get off the couch, like you said, and go out and vote for the Democrat, that seat flipped. And some of these red states are in that category. Maybe it's not a 6 vote margin, but they have been conditioned to believe they can't change their election when maybe they could if they just show up and vote.
Right. And but they have to have a reason for it. And now with all this
Yes.
shit going on, like Roe v. Wade, I mean, people underestimate how much Roe v. Wade is going to impact things. I think it is the single biggest issue going into the election. I mean, when you take constitutional rights away from all women, 50% of this country, 75% of the people support Roe v. Wade. Now, that's not going to affect me. Roe v. Wade, I'm not having any more kids, but these young people, when you tell them we're taking constitutional rights away from you and taking away bodily autonomy, that's going to piss some people off. And we're seeing it play out when they have these questions on the ballot, whether it be Ohio or wherever. That's going to have an impact on turnout. And turnout is the big issue here. Turnout was the reason why Joe Biden won in 2020. It wasn't that he was a great candidate at the time, it was turnout. And people were terrified of Donald Trump and the Republicans, and they're more terrified now than they were in 2020.
I want to say, and I could be getting the number wrong. I think they said it's something like if 60% of all registered voters turn out, it would be considered a landslide for the Democrats because that's how turnout works.
Right,
And if 65 would consistently turn out, Republicans would never win again anywhere. If
right,
you could get every state to have like 65% voter turnout, something like that. But this excitement is huge. I mean, Missouri's got an abortion amendment on the ballot, and that one establishes a right not only to an abortion, but the right to make private medical decisions and a right to birth control, etc. And those things it is written that they cannot change it up to the point of viability. And I think that's going to pass. But that's going to turn out voters, and people are going to be voting for whoever supports that amendment. So these Republicans who say, "Oh, vote no on that amendment," they're not going to get a vote yes by somebody who's also voting for to approve the amendment. It's just not going to work, I don't think.
Well, and we have all these situations now where we're hearing Republicans for Harris, right?
Yes.
There are people stepping away from the Republican Party, even though they're not Democrats and they don't like some of the policies. The alternative is frightening to them. So if you've got Rick Scott in Florida, Ted Cruz in Texas, or Josh Hawley in Missouri, and you're not going to vote for Donald Trump, you're afraid to vote for Donald Trump. Are you then going to vote for Josh Hawley or Rick Scott, who are Trumplafucks in their own right? No, it would make sense that if you're going to vote against Donald Trump and you're a Republican, you're going to either not vote for those folks or you're going to vote opposite of them.
Oh, definitely. You're going to vote against people who have supported Donald Trump. And the loudest
Or
voices,
abortion,
yeah,
making abortion illegal.
yeah, some of those loud voices are going to be voted out, I think, by Republicans and Republican voters. And I think it's going to be maybe not landslide margins for some of these people to be voted out, but it's going to be, I would say, eye-opening margins.
I
You're going to be
think,
surprised by how big it's not. I think some of these races, maybe Ted Cruz loses, 53 to 55% of the vote is what, Colin Allred gets or something like that. Big enough that it's not just over the margin, but enough that it's, oh, that's significant.
right. Well, and the thing is people have to understand this abortion issue. I think it's the biggest issue. It's the most important issue. There are other things we've got to be concerned about, but that abortion issue affects more people than any of the other ones. Um, it doesn't just affect Donald Trump. It affects everybody that supports making abortion illegal. So if you're voting to make it legal in your state, but Josh Hawley is looking to make it a national ban on abortion, it doesn't make sense to vote for it in your state and then vote for somebody who's then going to turn it into a national shutdown, and you're still fucked. People are smart enough to understand this. You've got to cut the head off, throw the tail out, and just eradicate everything that has to do with somebody wanting to make abortion illegal. So if you vote against Donald Trump and you vote for making abortion illegal, you certainly cannot vote for a fucking senator that's going to try to make it a national case. And
Exactly.
that's why when people say, "Oh, we're going to lose the Senate's going to be tough," maybe it is, but maybe it's not because we're in a different fucking world right now.
Well, and I've said for a while that the Democrats have an uphill battle in the Senate, and that was only because of math. That they were defending 24 of the 33 seats that were up for reelection.
Right.
The math was just against them. I wasn't saying it was impossible. I'm just saying they have work to do to keep the Senate, and I think they can. I
Yeah.
think they're going to keep the Senate. They may lose it, maybe go back to a 50-50 split, but they may keep the Senate. But then again, they could also maybe pick up a seat or two if Ted Cruz gets voted out. They vote out Josh Hawley and they vote out Rick Scott. Well, that's 3 seat pickup. We don't need Joe Manchin's seat. We don't need John Tester's seat in Montana, and we walk away with an additional seat. That's 52 seats now instead of 51.
And even more than that, something else to consider. Let Like you say, Joe Manchin, technically a Democrat, but he never really was any benefit to the Democrats. He was a Democrat in name only until he became an independent. Um, but let's go to Arizona. We had Cinema in Arizona. She was not a friend of the Democrats. She's gone now. Ruben Gallego's going up against Carrie Lake. She's going to beat Carrie Lake with no fucking problem. So now, instead of a lame ass senator, we gain a decent, legitimate Democratic senator in Arizona. So while that may not be a numbers gain, it is a net gain to us because we have somebody that's going to do the bidding of the Democratic Party as opposed to what Sinema did.
Yeah, and to be fair, when as long as it wasn't a 50-50 split, Joe Manchin doing what he did and trying to hold out and making a show on some of the more controversial topics, if his vote didn't screw the Democrats, I didn't care.
No,
It's when he was purposely holding stuff up or sinking stuff where the Democrats needed his vote because he goes, "Well, I can't take it back to my voters." If whatever it is, if it works, you can take it to your voters and say, "This is working. Here's why," and it should be enough to to keep you reelected. And then he did all of that in Joe Biden's first 2 years of, well, I'm going to torpedo this because I can't take it to my voters. I'm going to torpedo that. I can't take it to my voters and get reelected, and then doesn't run for reelection anyway.
well, and the thing about it is that what I had a problem with Joe is that anytime he sided with the Democrats, he cut some deal to benefit himself. He held them for ransom every time. I'm a Democrat. I can help you, but I need something in return, and that's why he's got a $750,000 fucking dollar boat sitting on the Potomac. For God's sake, it was all about enriching himself, and he wasn't a friend to the Democrats at all. Uh, the only thing I can hope for, and I don't know who's running for the Republican Party in in West Virginia, but the one thing that's worked to the Democrats' favor, every time there is a crazy Trumplafuck running against a Democrat, they almost always lose because people are getting tired of the crazy negativity and shit like that. Even people in red states are getting tired of all this chaos and bullshit we've dealt with for 8 years. People just want to live their lives and try to be happy.
You know what we really need to have happen for the West Virginia Senate race? Whoever the Republican is, they need Donald Trump's endorsement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a killer right there. And I would suspect he's going to give it and at the same time they are going to beg for it. We saw what this endorsement did in 2022. It didn't do jack shit, but they will still beg for that fucking endorsement.
Weirdly enough, one of the only people who was endorsed by Donald Trump and win their race, JD Vance.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just weird. I mean, it is kind of weird that that was the one person who won their election, and then Donald Trump ends up picking him to be his vice presidential nominee.
Yeah. It's and I'm sure there's a lot of people in Ohio sorry about that vote.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, this,
Too I wish all of the things that we found out about him now, and even some of the stuff that's not true that has gained momentum. If
right.
this stuff would have had momentum in 22, he never would have won.
But you know what? The in 22, even in 20 and 22, the Democrats were of a different mindset. They were the I'm above this all. They're not anymore. With Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, there's going to be some fighting going on. She's not afraid to mix it up. With Joe Biden, none of that would happen. Oh, we got to be bipartisan. And I'm not talking shit about Joe Biden. He's just a man from a different era. That's when politics were like that. But it's a new age right now, and we've got to address things like the age calls for. And Kamala Harris, thankfully, is in a position to do that. So is Tim Walz.
Oh yeah. Could you see if it was still the Biden Harris campaign? Well, could you have seen Kamala Harris saying, "Oh, I'd be glad to debate JD Vance anytime, any place if he can get up off the couch." Could
Right,
you have
right.
seen Kamala Harris make that shot? No.
Uh,
Tim Walz? Yes, he did. And it was
yeah,
hilarious.
it was hilarious. And, people made the comparison that JD Walls or JD Vance is this Ivy League educated guy. I heard somebody talking on TikTok and to go, well, it'd be interesting. You got JD Vance, Ivy League educated, a tech bro, and all this stuff, and then you got uh, Tim Walls with a state college degree and a teacher. and he said it's going to be a mismatch when they debate because Tim Walz is going to kick his ass. Has nothing to do with education. Tim
Yeah.
Walz has this down home dad type persona, but listen to him talk sometime. He's a smart motherfucker. He is
Oh,
smart.
he is. But he's come up with some great branding just off the cuff.
Yeah.
Referring to them as weird was great. It was brilliant. His couch joke, great. Like his stuff is hitting and it's working, but he also seems relatable, and I think he's going to do a great job. He was a great pick, and the fact that he seems so relatable and down to earth is the change of pace we need.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the big difference is with Kamala and Tim Walz both. They're decent people. People like them. They feel warm toward them, but they're also fighters. They aren't going to take any shit. And Tim Walz is one of those guys that's the most dangerous because he's got this big smile and he seems like the nicest guy in the world. But fuck with him. He's been in the military. He's going to come at you, and it's not going to be pleasant when he does. And same with Kamala Harris. As a former prosecutor, that's the last motherfucker that Donald Trump wants to talk to. You know, it's funny. Both Donald Trump and JD Vance says, "Yeah, I'll debate, but I want to do the Fox one first." They really think they're going to be safe at Fox, and I don't think they'd be safe at Fox or anywhere. But they want to do it first, and both Walz and Harris say, no, that's not what we contracted for. We'll meet you on the 10th or October 1st with Tim Walz. Uh, they're just going to force them to do what they said they're going to do, and it's not going to be on their home court, and their head's going to be fucked with the moment they walk in. They're going to think
Oh,
they've lost before they even walk in.
oh yeah. The September 10th debate, I think will there is a good chance this will be the only
Oh
debate
yeah,
we get between the two. Um,
absolutely.
Multiple reasons. One, you have the sentencing app between the two debates between Trump and Harris. In between, sandwiched in between those two debate times, is the date Donald Trump gets sentenced for 34 felonies.
Right.
He could be sitting in a jail cell. He may not be able to travel. We don't know what that's going to bring or what that's going to look like.
Well, and
So,
I'll bet you this too that if Donald Trump goes in there and gets his ass kicked, JD doesn't show up on the October 1st.
good chance of it, although JD Vance is such a creep, a weirdo,
Yeah.
a bully, that he might go in and try to bully over Tim Walz, thinking he can do it because he's not going up against Kamala Harris, and he's going to go in and try to one up the ticket, thinking he can do something. There's a chance of that,
You know
but
the
I think Donald Trump is gonna he gets beaten. It's going to be as bad as we think. He won't show up for the second debate.
the thing about Walls is people will think that Kamala is going to be a better debater than Walls. And Walls has a secret weapon, and that's his ability with humor. And the reason that's a secret weapon against Donald Trump or JD Vance is because of who they are, narcissists. They fucking hate getting embarrassed. And Tim Walz has the capability of embarrassing both of them. And once they get embarrassed, they get mad and then they lose their shit and it's fucking all over. So they might be looking sideways at Kamala, but Tim Walz will surprise these fucks. I guarantee you.
I mean, Tim Walz could get the upper hand in that debate in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All he has to do is make one couch joke.
Well, and the thing is, JD's educated, but what we've seen of him when he's talking and he gets the questions and he doesn't know how to respond, this guy is a little socially awkward.
Yeah,
Donald Trump is demented. He's real easy. All Kamala has to do is piss him off right in the beginning, and then he's lost it for the rest of the show. He's done. That's an easy debate because you just have to piss him off, like the lady did in the black journalist thing. She listed all the things that he didn't want to hear. pissed him off and it was shit for the rest of the show. That's all Kamala has to do. And she's smart enough to understand that. Um, but neither one of them like being embarrassed. Um, it's good, since we're here, let's talk about the imminent thing. This show is probably going to air on Monday, okay, or Sunday. No, this will air on Sunday. So tomorrow is uh, is the convention, the Democratic National Convention, and there's a lot of people excited about it, a lot of people worried about it. I think it's going to be a more joyful event than what we saw with the Republican convention, but we also have the prospect of some of the protest or whatever might happen outside, and I think that's going to be mostly the Israeli Gaza stuff. I don't think we're going to see Trump fucks out there.
No, I don't think there's going to be too many Trump fucks. There may be some because there are always some. But the Israeli Gaza protests, there might be some through it. But we also know there have been some talk that I think it's both the UN and the Biden administration are pushing to maybe have a ceasefire by the end of next week or by the end of the coming week.
Yeah,
So we have, that could happen and that could kill all of the protests. That might, if the ceasefire gets announced between here and there or happens during the convention, they won't be protesting anymore. But I think you're going to see a much more lighthearted convention. It's going to be full of positivity. The thing I'm looking forward to the most about it, though, is going to be the platform. We're going to
yeah,
finally hear a lot about what her plans are in one of the bigger, in probably the biggest stage she's going to have outside of maybe the debates
right,
going up to the election.
right. And I think the Democrats are smart enough, and she's got Joe Biden to consult with. Um, the thing about it is that I think Joe Biden could deliver the platform, and Kamala could deliver the same platform, but it's going to be better received from Kamala just because she's more animated, because she's got this excitement behind her. But Joe's going to be very helpful in putting that together. Nobody's more experienced than Joe when it comes to being in DC. So she's got a very strong support going into laying out this platform and doing this speech. She's a good speech maker. So that's just going to add to the excitement that we already see with her.
Oh, yeah. And um, all eyes are going to be on her. No eyes are going to be on Donald Trump.
Right.
And which means the shit is going to fly with the convention. I'm thinking he's going to do another presser. He may try to do a rally. Who knows what he's going to try to get the attention back on himself because that's what he craves. And it's going to be horrible. And it's just going to keep costing him votes. But I'm looking forward to hearing what they have for a platform. We know some of it, codifying Roe v. Wade, most of what she already talked about with the economy. But it's going to be good to hear what their main priorities are. And she's going to lay out a plan to make it all happen. And I think people need to hear that beyond the excitement of just a new candidate. People need to be excited for what she wants to do as well.
I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, if you want to make a comparison to the Republican Party, the fact that she wants to do anything should get people excited because the Republicans do nothing.
That's fair. I mean, she doesn't, she wants to continue our way of existence as a country and not do Project 2025 and not condense everything to the um admit to the presidency, and she wants to keep the Department of Education. And the list goes on. The fact that she, like you said, she wants to just do anything is huge because the only thing the Republicans really have for a platform is destroy everything.
Project 2025, they try to step away from it, but I think they've been pretty successful of velcroing this on the back of Donald Trump and all the Republicans. And I think people are terrified of 2025. I don't think Donald Trump will get elected, so I'm not as worried about it actually happening. But as much as they try to step away from it, there's another video, there's another document or something that attaches the Republicans to it, and they can't get away from it. And Project 2025 may be second to Roe v. Wade as far as the death knell for the Republicans.
Oh yeah. And we've talked about it before. I think you could be witnessing the end of the Republican Party
Oh, I
as a
think
whole.
so. As
I think you're going
as
to,
we know it today.
yes, I think you may see in some of these more vulnerable districts, maybe where you couldn't win as a Democrat, but maybe that's where the libertarians or somebody gets a foothold and they start getting members of Congress in this next midterm, and maybe they slowly start pushing Republicans out as they gain momentum as a viable conservative alternative to the Republicans. The Republicans, if they're just going to keep losing,
Yeah.
and the more they're tied to Project 2025 and destroying our democracy, and the more Democrats get done and make things better for Americans, there's they're going to be pushing themselves out of existence, and there may be room for a third party to come in and replace the Republicans.
But don't you think the only thing the Republicans can do once they get their ass kicked in November, they're going to have to do some kind of reset or some kind of change. They can't stick with MAGA because it's just not working. It worked once in 2016 and hasn't worked since. The only thing I can imagine them doing is trying to reset back to the way they were, which I don't think will work because that was too much. But the likes of Liz Cheney or some of the people that consider themselves normal Republicans that maybe have a little bit of integrity. I've always thought that. I always thought Liz Cheney, she walked out of there, she got booted out, but she's just biding her time so she can come and pick up the pieces from what's left of MAGA and try to reform the normal Republican Party. But even if they do that, that's going to take years and years and years to reestablish.
Well, like I said, the problem is I think there's going to end up having to rebrand as an entire new party altogether.
That could
Because
be.
even predating MAGA, you go all the way back to 2008 with the Tea Party, and even Mitch McConnell at the time saying, "I'm going to make Barack Obama a one-term president. We're not going to do anything." I think that was the first steps toward the end of the Republican Party. And there's too many, even the normal ones like a Liz Cheney or a Mitt Romney, they're almost going to have to go away from the brand because it's going to be viewed as that toxic of a brand.
I think you're probably right about that. When somebody says Republican, they think, "Oh, fuck, this is horrible." It reminds me of when I was in my 20s talking about branding, and when things go bad, it just goes away. In the early 80s, I was a producer at a talk radio station. Now remember, this is the early 80s, early to mid 80s. And there was a regular sponsor, a national sponsor that we played all the time. And it was a diet aid. It was, a little piece of chocolate that you ate, and it caused you to not be hungry or lose weight somehow. Now, the name of that little pill or that little piece of chocolate was called AIDS, AIDS. And then, of course, in the early 80s, we had this big AIDS scare and this pandemic of AIDS. And that fucking thing just went by the wayside, just by virtue of the name. It was spelled different, but you can't go, I'm gonna lose some weight, so I'm gonna get AIDS. That had a whole fucking different thing. So people will look at the Republican Party as people who are against abortion, who are for overturning elections and overthrowing the government. And you're right, the branding will be hard to bring back. It's like bringing back the Edsel car. I didn't even know if the Edsel car was bad, but I wouldn't buy one based on the branding that it now has.
Yeah, I mean, everything I have heard about the Edsel was that there was nothing good about the Edsel,
Right,
that the
right.
whole thing was bad. Like it was bad from the get-go. And it's about branding. Remember, one of the biggest brand fails of all time, New Coke from
Yeah.
the 80s. I've studied marketing. And they talk about how they came out with this idea of new Coke and it bombed. People hated it. And for 20 years now, almost, they've had to put Coca Cola Classic on their thing
Right.
to remind people that this isn't new Coke. We didn't try this again. It's not. It's this is the Coke you know and love. Um, and that's what I think they're going to have to do with this Republican Party. They're going to have to come up with a new brand, a new name, whether it's, who knows what. Like I said, whether it's the Libertarians or whoever, or they come up with something entirely new, an entirely different party, reformed out of the old Republican Party with probably some of the same people. But then they are going to have to slowly get away from the more MAGA people and replace them at varying positions. You primary out people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. You work to get out from those crazies, and it's going to take them a little bit, and they are going to have to establish, if they do this, as a completely separate entity enough that they can't have anybody who was part of the 2020 Stop the Steal movement, or really tied close to Donald Trump front and center, or they're going to carry that stink into the new party as well.
Absolutely. And if we were talking about the 60s and 70s, people would say branding, what the fuck is that? But in this day and age, in this digital age, branding is everything. Give you an example. Donald Trump thinks his most valuable thing that he owns is his branding. How many people do you think are paying him now to stick his name on the front of their building? I'm guaranteeing nobody, and half of them are taking him down. And the Republican Party, Donald Trump will end up being a pariah. There's no question about that with his convictions and with all the things that will come out. But he is the face of the Republican Party now. And he will be forever tied to the Republican Party. And like you say, that'll completely fuck up the branding for the Republican Party. They probably will have to come up with a different name, create a different brand. And you don't do that overnight.
No, it's going to take them a while, and they're going to have to do it in a way that also breeds favorability with donors.
Right.
And for a while, if they're competing with each other, they're going to be fighting for the same group of donors. It is only beneficial to Democrats. But if they're doing this, and if I'm right, then the Democrats need to keep their foot on the gas
Right.
and they need to get shit done. I was thinking about this earlier with as much energy as around the Harris Walls campaign. We have red states for Harris, Republicans for Harris, and all of this. They need to get stuff accomplished for the American people to make sure that those voters aren't one time Harris voters. Maybe we can, they need to be behind her and what she's accomplished more than just this election. As important as this election is, the having that kind of a coalition can't fail
Right.
after November 5th.
Right. Well, and in addition to that, you got to consider the young people, the millennials and Gen Zs playing a big part in 2024. They're going to have control in 2028. The whole conservative concept and the kids dealing with what they're dealing with now, the entire idea of conservatism might go by the wayside. I wouldn't be surprised if we would have two parties be one kind of a centrist party and one kind of being a farther left party.
Yeah, well, you might still have a conservative party, but the idea of what it means to be a conservative is going to change. Instead of looking back to the 40s, 50s, and 60s, going, oh, we need to go back to those kind of ways, we're going to be looking back to the 80s, 90s, and going, maybe, but even that wasn't great. So I
Well,
don't know.
the Republicans were successful though in selling an idea that wasn't true. But the idea is basically this. They'd never say this, but as we look at it now and more is being exposed, a conservative believes this. A conservative believes the trickle down theory, give the money to the rich, give the money to the elite, and take the money out of the middle class. Any money you give to the middle class or any help you give to the middle class is bad. Now, as we sit here now, we're talking to people who might be in the middle class, they'd say that's an easy fucking choice. course, we don't want to give all the money to the rich, and we want the middle class to be cultivated so we can continue the success in this country. But they've been successful in saying, look, we can't give out handouts to the middle class because we cannot afford it. And people bought into it. Democrats bought into it. I've heard Democrats, well, we just don't want to put our kids in debt. But the fact of the matter is, they never say that when it comes to giving tax credits to the rich or putting $1 trillion into the defense fund. This was all branding in this case. We don't, everybody's got to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. Any money that we give to the middle class is a bad thing. And that's just not the case. They were successful in selling that ideology, and it's bullshit. And unfortunately for them, more people are seeing it. The clouds are clearing, the smoke is clearing, and what's really going on is becoming very apparent.
Oh yeah. Part of that too is this idea. It wasn't so much about no handouts. They have convinced a group of people that, oh, if you have a job and you still need a little bit of help, you're not the problem. But that other person over there who isn't working as hard as you, who is also getting benefits, they're the problem. We can't afford to help them. They have divided when there's not much difference between the two groups, but the Republicans have successfully divided the even the people on benefits and made you believe that those people are somehow bad. That and it is ridiculous. And they always have these boogeymen of, oh well, people are eating better
Right.
than I do, and they're on food stamps or whatever. And a lot of that comes from anecdotal evidence or a one-time experience where you saw one person one time buying something fancier than you'd ever buy, and you go, oh well, they're eating better than me.
Yeah.
But then you ask them, oh well, would you ever buy that? Well, no, I wouldn't eat that.
Right. Well, yeah, there's a quote, and I think it was Lyndon Baines Johnson. I may be wrong about that. And I won't get the quote exactly. So don't write me letters and say, no, it's not that guy, it's this guy, and this is what he really said. Basically, the premise is this: as long as we can convince poor white people that they're doing better than black people, they'll vote for you. And that's essentially true. It's all a fucking shell game.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying is we've convinced people that they're better than a group of other people. And that's why there was a group, they were talking about it back when there was a shooting in Texas by a Latino person who had who was a Trump supporter and everything else and stuff. They were looking into him and he was very anti-immigration and anti-people coming across the border. Well, he had convinced himself that because he was second or third generation, whatever he was, of being here, that he was somehow better than the
Yeah,
Latinos that were coming across the border now, the new immigrants.
right.
And it's the same thing. They've gotten us divided, or they had us divided. I think now it's becoming more and more evident that people are seeing through that divide and going, no, that's all bull. We need to keep the money in the middle class and in the lower classes and start taking back from the wealthy class.
Well, I think they opened Pandora's box when, for decades and decades, they sell their shit. But with all that's going on now, it's been brought to the surface, and all this under the radar shit that they've been doing is now apparent to us, and we're kind of appalled by it. That we can thank Donald Trump for exposing all the warts and scars and things of our government by his behavior. And that's why I think, after November, we're going to be looking at different times. There was a time when everybody was apathetic. That's why we are where we are. But people are engaged in this because their livelihoods are at risk now. So they're engaged now. And this is the absolute worst thing the government wants is people who know shit and people who are engaged and people who are activated by it. And that's what's happened over the last 8 years. That's the one positive thing that's come out of this.
Well, I would say that's not, you're close. That's the one thing Republican government doesn't want us to have. I think the Democrats are better with us having at least some more information, but they're only gonna be okay with it up until a point until we start holding their feet to the fire too.
Right. I mean, the way this should be in this country, the way it was laid out, the way it was planned, was we are supposed to have the power. The Republicans obviously want all the power, but don't sell the Democrats short either. Up until 2015, I could have looked at Republicans and Democrats as six of one and half a dozen of the other. They were just coming at it at a different approach. We have some problems in the Democratic Party too. And like you say, once they get power, we got to keep stepping on the gas because they'll get lazy if we let them.
Oh yeah, I mean, we like I said, we got to get some stuff done. But I've also said it's incumbent on us though to also do the work
Yeah,
and make sure Kamala Harris has a favorable House, favorable Senate to be able to get the things done, because it doesn't do us any good. She can say she wants to do all this in her first 100 days. If she doesn't have both chambers of Congress, it ain't happening anyway.
exactly. What we want to be able to do is say, okay, Kamala's the president. She got a good margin in the House, a decent margin in the Senate. Now get to work, motherfuckers. You made some promises. I mentioned this when I was talking to Ed too. I said, my problem with the Democrats, and I'm not trying to be negative here, I'm just trying to be careful. The Democrats have been talking about doing things for the middle class, and I appreciate that, and that's what they should be doing. My question is, were they doing that because they wanted to help the middle class, or were they doing that because it was the one thing that was going to work or be the opposite of what the Republicans wanted to do? Is this campaign strategy, or is this how they truly feel? I'm hoping that's how they truly feel, but we've got to determine that once they get the power. Because let's be honest, they could have codified Roe v. Wade 30 years ago, and they didn't do it when they had the chance. So they have the capacity of being lazy too.
Oh, they do. And in part, they looked at Roe and said, "Well, it's settled. It's settled. They're not going to touch it. They wouldn't dare to bring it down. They almost, I don't want to say they openly challenged Republicans to bring it down, but they said they wouldn't do it. They believed the Republicans wouldn't be dumb enough to bring down Roe v. Wade. And then the Republicans gave us Donald Trump.
Right. And in retrospect, it was a dumb thing because they're going to come crashing down because they took advantage of a situation where the Democrats just got lazy and didn't do it. But had the Democrats done that when they had the opportunity, and they said, well, we got other things, it's settled law, nobody's ever going to do it. Well, you fuck around and find out. Learn that lesson. Don't assume you're safe. Make sure it's done properly. Make sure it's locked down. We got to do that with Roe v. Wade coming up after November. But there's some other shit too that we've got to lock down and just not assume that people wouldn't be crazy enough to do it because clearly there are people crazy enough.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's going to be work that has to be done. We have to fix our tax code. We have to shore up Social Security. We have to fix our health care. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what Kamala Harris says about health care at the convention.
Yeah.
She's kind of hedged a little bit. First, she said she was more for a single payer system, and now she's backed off of that a little bit. But if she goes in full in for a universal health care, they better make it happen,
Yeah.
because we need something like that. I mean, just the win for the prescription drugs on Medicare. I mean, big pharma's already suing, trying to say, well, no, no, even though they negotiated the prices, they're trying to sue that and prevent them those new negotiated prices from going into effect
Right.
because of how much money it's going to cost big pharma. That should be a sign that they're scared of not being able to set their own prices and having government control. Everybody should have access to that.
Absolutely. And I hope against hope that once the Democrat, I mean, the way I look at it with the Republicans, um, I don't see beating the Republicans as the final win. I see this as the dumpster fire going on that we've got to put out and then we got to continue to fight to actually fix everything. And whenever I have problems, I look at the biggest problem, I try to get that done, and then I worry about the other problems after that. Because if you don't do that, it's overwhelming. But we got to stop the Republicans. That's the first and foremost thing. And then we got to figure out what we've got to do next. But the work doesn't stop once the Republicans are out of power. There's a whole shitload of stuff we have to do. We've got the Supreme Court, we've got Roe v. Wade, we've got Citizens United, we've got the tax code. There's so much shit, and it's going to take at least 2 terms for a Democratic president and some control in the House and Senate to get anything done. Because if you let the Republicans back in, they'll start blocking it and everything will slow down again.
That's true, but the only way we can do all of that in 2 terms is if they get some stuff done in the first term and specifically in the first 2 years.
Absolutely.
Because you got that next group of midterms. We can't, the Democrats can't hold back and hope that the negative implications from Donald Trump and the carryover of how bad that is will carry into the next midterms and just propel them through. If they don't get anything accomplished in those first 2 years, they're going to give control of Congress right back to the Republicans or whatever replaces the Republicans, unless they are in that bad of disarray.
Absolutely. Well, it is an opportunity if they get the House and the Senate and Kamala Harris in the White House. Now, what they've got, they don't have a win, they have an opportunity. And like you say, if they actually get stuff done, they can keep this momentum going. They'll get through the midterms and through the final 2 years of the first term. And as long as they keep doing good things, they're going to keep getting elected. And I'm just hoping that we take some dramatic actions like trying to get rid of the filibuster, trying to deal with Citizens United, all taking money out of the elections and such. They got to be very proactive in getting stuff done, and if they do, they will be paid dividends in upcoming elections.
Oh, yeah, very much so. And speaking of the filibuster, I don't know if we've talked about it, but I read an article that said Elizabeth Warren believes if they have a Democratic controlled Senate, that they will have the votes to either suspend or completely jettison the filibuster.
That needs to be done. I mean, both parties are afraid to do it because they're afraid when the other party gets in, then they'll just run everything through. And that may or may not be true. But the fact of the matter is, while it's there, nothing gets done, which is contrary to why we even have a fucking Congress. Now, if you're worried about the Republicans getting control and doing a bunch of crazy shit, don't give them control. Vote the motherfuckers out. Because when the Democrats get in and they can actually accomplish some things, then we'll get some movement. I'd rather have like I always tell people, you're better off making the wrong decision as opposed to no decision, because at least you're moving forward and you can adjust even with the wrong decision. But
Mm-hmm.
we've got the Congress gridlocked, and some people say I love it when it's gridlocked. Then why have fucking Congress if you're not going to get anything done?
Well, yeah, when it's gridlocked like this, it used to be pre-Obama, even a Congress like this, you could get stuff done. Even Obama could have gotten stuff through a Congress that was gridlocked like this,
Right.
because our politics had didn't change as bad. It was working on changing with Obama, and it got worse with Trump, where the give and take is gone.
Right.
It used to be, well, you cut me a couple of earmarks for something. I really want to fund this bridge in my hometown. It's going to run a couple $1 million. You put that bridge money in the bill. You got my vote.
Right.
Something like that.
Right.
Even though they couldn't come to terms, or you know what? Yeah, let's come to terms. You give me that earmark, but take 10 million off the cost of whatever. We'll just fund that a little less, and
Right.
they would negotiate. Now it's, oh, Democrat brought it up. Nope, not voting for it. Oh, Republican put that forward. Not voting for it.
You're absolutely right. That's one of the things that have to be fixed after the election because there'll be Republicans in the House and the Senate, whether Democrats have the majority or not. We've got to get back to that point where there is some negotiation and compromise. I mean, again, that's the whole point of having Congress, compromise and negotiations. If we don't have that, again, we have a non functional Congress, and we can't afford to continue to do that. There does have to be some give and take. There does have to be some trade offs. And we don't have that now. And that's why very little gets done. Hopefully, once we get past this and MAGA may be on the wayside, we can get rid of the divisiveness that we have now and get some kind of work done by Congress, do the work they're supposed to do in working together to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think so. And if what we were talking about comes to pass and the Republicans are as a whole are going to the wayside and they have to rebrand with a new party and fight amongst themselves for a little bit, you're going to see even more of a compromise because the new party is going to probably work with the Democrats to get stuff passed around the old guard Republicans just so they can attach some wins to their names and say, hey, we brought you this infrastructure
Right.
bill, or we helped pass this, or we passed that. So they get some goodwill with the American people. If there ends up being a third party rising out of what is the collapsing Republicans, you're going to see some of that. You're going to see more, uh, working together, even if the Democrats don't need the help to get those bills passed, just because they need to build some credibility with the American people.
Well, and there will be some motivation for them to work with Democrats and Democrats with the Republicans. The fuck around and find out moment will be November 5th because we've got a House of Representatives that have done nothing. It's largely due to the Republicans, largely due to MAGA. But there are regular people in the Republican Party that just went along with MAGA. And when they start losing House seats, they're going to realize that they shouldn't have fucking sided with MAGA. They should have got some things done because that's going to be on every campaign. This house did nothing. Why keep them here? Let's kick them out. People are going to lose jobs because of nothing happening. And nothing happened because they sided with MAGA, even though they thought they were better than MAGA. They're going to learn lessons here. And whoever comes in after them is either going to have to get some things done or they're going to be gone after 2 years.
Exactly. I can't wait to see how much better things are after
Yeah.
um, January 3rd when the new Congress is in play. Um, I had done a video, I think we've talked about it before, about how that 17-day window after the new Congress is in, if it's a favorable Democratic Congress, there could be 17 days where Joe Biden gets some stuff on his desk to sign
Right.
to get the ball rolling for the Harris administration. Now, I don't think it will be anything that would steal any thunder from Kamala Harris.
No.
Like, it won't be anything big that would, even though it might be needed to help the American people. I think the stuff he would sign would be the stuff that they would be afraid that she would take the heat for.
Right. Well,
Like maybe,
once the election is over, there is a 17-day sweet spot before the inauguration where where Joe Biden, with his immunity and everything, could do whatever the fuck he wants, and it wouldn't
yeah,
affect her.
to an extent. But I'm just saying, the Democrats, if they were smart, expanding the Supreme Court is always going to be a hot button issue, and
Yeah.
it's going to be unfavorable. But if Kamala Harris is on board with expanding the court, what they could do is Joe Biden could expand it on his way out. He could sign the bill that
Yeah.
expands it, not
He could.
appoint any of the four new justices, have her walk in with four justice seats to fill, and go, oh well, the previous guy opened the door. I'm just
I
filling
didn't
the
do it.
seats that are there. Right.
I personally think that Kamala Harris is more for expanding the court than Joe Biden is because Joe Biden's got that old school attitude.
Oh, I probably. I'm saying though, I could also see Joe Biden because he might have an old school attitude, but if she's on board for doing it, and if they come to some kind of an agreement where they think that it would negatively hurt her favorability you know, at all going forward,
Yeah.
that he takes the heat for doing the actual expansion. She just fills the seats.
Absolutely. Well, they better be looking at expanding it because it's really the only option they have. The whole impeachment thing is going to be long and drawn out, and it may or may not work. It's never worked before. So the expansion of the court is the important thing. And hopefully Joe Biden and or Kamala Harris have that in mind because that's one of the most important things we have to fix. Because without a credible third branch of our government, we've got a problem with democracy.
Right. And expanding the court is a short-term solution,
Yeah,
realistically,
yeah,
because that fixes the immediate problem. What they really need to do is pass a constitutional amendment. And I think they need to put in a code of ethics. They need to put in some kind of a term limit. They need to put in some qualifications to be a justice. Whatever
yeah,
those there are zero qualifications to be a Supreme Court justice in the Constitution.
right,
The only qualification you need is approved by the Senate. That's
right.
it. They could appoint me without a law degree, no training as a judge, never read a law book, and I could be on the Supreme Court tomorrow if I was nominated and approved by the Supreme or by the Senate.
Yeah. You know what they could do? What might be the most expeditious thing? We know that Clarence Thomas is looking at some possible crimes and a possible indictment, not now, but after the election. And Alito has some issues too. What if Kamala, the prosecutor, says, listen, we'll cut a deal. You retire. You want to retire anyways. You retire, and we won't prosecute your ass. Get them out, put two more in. So now we got five against four, and it's Democrats or liberals. That's a,
That's a
that's a,
that's another option. And with that, I mean, you have those two potentially facing some issues for their own involvement. There was some question about John Roberts. And on top of it, John Roberts is already going to be, he's 69 or 70 years old. He's right there too.
right,
So he could end up in the next 4 to 8 years wanting to retire.
right.
So you lean on Thomas and Alito. It wouldn't be a bad move to lean on them, get a retirement in exchange for no prosecution. And there is maybe not for a Supreme Court justice, but there is some precedent of an elected official retiring to avoid prosecution. Because
Absolutely.
wasn't it Spiro Agnew who resigned the vice presidency?
Yep.
He walked into a courthouse under indictment, walked out a free man, but no longer the vice president.
Yeah. Yeah. He walked in and he said, I don't even know what the hell it was. Maybe I don't even know what it is. He resigned and pled noli contendere, and I don't think anything happened to him. But he wasn't the vice president anymore,
Yeah, and then Nixon appointed Ford, and the rest is history.
and
But
Ford
it
became
wouldn't be the
president.
first time that a politician or an elected official in a major, one stepped aside to get out of legal trouble. So I could very well see Thomas or Alito stepping aside. I could even see Thomas offering potentially a retirement,
Yeah,
depending on the charges that come out against Ginny Thomas.
right, right, exactly. And having a prosecutor on our side to get that done makes it even more interesting. Because if anybody would know how to pull something like that off, it would be Kamala Harris. She's done some pretty big cases, and these fucks, I mean, they're old anyway. They're not going to be there very long anyway. If they could cut a deal, now some people will say, well, we shouldn't let them off the hook. They should go to jail. Look, they're in their 70s, going to be 80. I don't give a fuck. They're going to die anyway. Just get them out of there and let's get down to business in the Supreme Court at this point.
Yeah, you're right. The thing is, it needs to be done in such a way that even if she's involved, there needs to be somehow where she has plausible deniability
Well, true.
about it. Because the Republicans, or at least a section of Republicans, are already screaming, weaponize DOJ, just trying to use the DOJ to get their way. If you know, if it appears publicly that she's involved, I'm not saying it wouldn't be like she couldn't make it happen. I'm saying if it appears publicly that she's involved, at least a section of this country is going to say, well, maybe there was some credibility to that
Yeah.
weaponized DOJ thing.
Well, the thing about it is you don't, in this day and age, you don't have to go sit down with them and say, if you don't retire, you're going to go to jail. All you have to do is let that waft in the rumor mill all around DC, and that'll make them nervous, and that'll make them think, and let them make that decision. They aren't going to take a risk of going to fucking jail. If there's some investigations, if there's the DOJ looking at the FBI doing an investigation, there's going to be an investigation already in Clarence Thomas. That's already happening. So um, these people are going to get nervous, especially when their power base, MAGA and the Republicans, are fucking gone. They're going to change their attitudes completely when they've got no safety net. So we'll see what happens, but I think the Supreme Court is going to be dealt with, and I, I I think the bad guys are going to have to leave.
Oh, I hope so. And I think once the Supreme Court is dealt with, I think we need to get some, do what they do, pull a page out of their book, find a case out of a red state with the abortion issue, even if it's already been codified at the federal level,
Right.
and get it right back before the court and have the court decide it again the other direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Overturn themselves one more time, and it can happen. We need to do that with that one. I don't know if we could do anything to restore affirmative action. That might be a lost cause. Um, but then also the Chevron deference deal. We need to restore that as well. And maybe once we get the court balance back the way it should be, or in a better light, not even that it needs to be all the way liberal, just not so far right that we're still sitting with 1960s ideals on the court.
Yeah.
They're not, they're looking at things, you know, in a way that isn't realistic anymore.
Well, if the court is running properly, it shouldn't be political at all. It shouldn't be liberal and conservative. It should be making decisions based on rule of law. And we've gotten away from that. So I'd be happy with just basing decisions on the law as opposed to your conservative ideology or whatever the fuck it is. Uh, Eric, we're going to have to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. Thanks for coming in. We always have a great conversation, and I appreciate when you do come in because it gives me some insight. And I appreciate the fact, because people always say this, oh, you just get mad at people when people disagree with you. No, I don't. You disagree with some things I say, and I'm cool with that. I'm all for hearing a different point of view because I'm not always right. My wife will point that out. I'll get her out of bed right now and she'll point that out. He's never fucking right.
Yeah, she would say you're never right, especially for getting her out of bed.
Yeah.
Um,
I got to tell one story though, because everybody I always talk about my granddaughter, and for whatever reason, people like that. And my granddaughter, she's pretty funny and she's kind of a smart ass, but she always comes up with stuff. And my oldest son, her dad was one of these kids. He was a really good kid. He's got everybody buffaloed. I mean, he is a good kid, but I live with him. I know he's not. And people look at him like he's Jesus. He's the greatest kid in the world. So I was overseeing her the other day, and when I leave, they're in an apartment, walking down the hallway. She always walks with me. She wants to push the elevator button and say goodbye and hug me and all that stuff. And so she pushes the button. I get in the elevator. I go, bye, honey. And she goes, bye, bye, love you, and all that stuff. And then she looks at me, but I won't miss you, Grandpa. I go, you little smartass. I go, what do you mean you won't miss me? And she looks at me and she goes, I won't miss you because you're always in my heart. And I'm going,
nice.
fuck. Thankfully, the door closed. Otherwise, I would have gone in my wallet and give her every penny I had. She knows how to play this thing perfectly, just like her
Oh yeah.
dad did, just like her dad did. So now I got to deal with that when I go see her. I give her a hard time. She gives me a hard time. Like stupid stuff. I mean, this is the cutest little girl. I'm sitting there on the couch and she goes up to me and she says, Grandpa, give me a hug. And this fucking kid, I hug her. It was kind of out of, we weren't leaving. I wasn't coming. We wouldn't necessarily hug in this situation. But the moment I hugged her, she farted. She knew that was coming. I got to teach her the finger trip because she doesn't know the finger trips. You don't have to hug to get this done. So anyway, Eric,
Uh,
thank you for coming by. I appreciate it immensely, and we'll talk to you again soon because there's so much shit going to be happening between now and November. There's going to be something crazy every fucking day, so there'll all be plenty to talk about.
oh yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Like I said, I love being here on the podcast. It's always a good time.
We got to check out Eric on TikTok. You're on YouTube too, right? Yeah,
Yep.
you are.
I'm
I
on
know.
TikTok and YouTube at Analytical Iowan. Um, go ahead, look me up. I have the same one either way. If you find my TikTok, I've got my YouTube linked in there. Over on my YouTube page, I do have some longer videos that I don't post up on TikTok. Mostly because I try to keep things about 3 minutes on TikTok.
Yeah.
Um, and I've got a few longer ones. Especially, I've got a playlist called Government Answers where I have looked at some of the questions I see popping up in comment sections where people were just wrong about things, where
Right.
they weren't, I don't want to say intentionally wrong, misinformed, didn't quite know. One of them was like, if Joe Biden were to step aside now, how would that process play out? Who becomes the president? Who becomes vice president? And all of that. So I've got my Government Answers playlist, which is of some longer form videos. I've been working on getting even more on there. Just trying to answer some of the confusion I'm seeing about how our government works.
Absolutely. So check out Analytical Iowan, ANALYTICALIOWAN.
Yes. And if you're watching over on the YouTube, down under my picture, I do have my name and I have how to spell my username on both platforms under my picture. So that will um, help you find me.
Talking about branding. You should have gone with Iowa Thinking Man or something.
Maybe
Maybe.
that might have been easier, but it was one of the first things that I kind of thought of that hadn't been already taken by somebody else.
Well, yeah, and it's accurate. What you're doing is kind of what a lot of us are doing is taking a look at the situation and analyzing it and trying to figure out what it really means. And you do a great job with it. So if you haven't checked out Eric on TikTok or YouTube, you must do that. Analytical Iowan, and it'll be well worth your effort. For those of you listening, I want to thank you for taking the time to do that. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.